Welcome to Karen's Conversations. I am very happy to be talking today with Stephen Mann, an esteemed industry colleague. We're going to be talking about IT service management tools and what's happening in that space. Before we jump into the conversation, I'm going to throw to Stephen, welcome him, and ask him to introduce himself. Welcome, Stephen.
Hello, and hello everyone else. So by way of introduction, I guess the easiest thing to say is that I write stuff and I talk a lot. And that's about it, mostly about IT service management, but I'm happy to chime in on other things. I've had a bit of a varied work life, shall we say. I started off, I suppose I trained as an accountant was the first thing that I did process auditing, then got into IT via the back door. I was a future business analyst. That meant I had to learn a bit about IT before getting into IT service management, then leaving employment and becoming a consultant, before becoming an industry analyst at Overman Forrester. Then I was a marketing guy, product marketing guy for a SaaS IT service management tool provider. And in the last 2 years, I've spent just writing marketing collateral for different IT service management tool vendors before starting with other people, ITSM.tools.
So tell us more about ITSM.tools. What drove that to come about? Who's it for? And what's the purpose of ITSM.tools?
Yeah, I see it as three sides of the same coin. The driver for it, in that, firstly, I thought there was a gap in the market, that whether you're working as a practitioner or whether you work for an IT service management tool vendor, it can be pretty hard to get hold of information. If you've got a subscription to, say, a tier one industry analyst firm, then you might get access to some stuff, but otherwise it can be difficult to get hold of stuff. And even with the tier one players, sometimes it's difficult to get hold of the right type of information. So I definitely saw an opportunity both to provide information for free via the ITSM.tools website to practitioners, but also to help out IT service management tool vendors, in that I'm a firm believer that they have a wealth of information within their people, within their IP, and we often miss out on that. We might get it if we're already a customer, but whether it be at events or whether it be reading, let's say, blogs or articles or white papers that they produce, I think a lot of us are sometimes loath to do that, in that we've probably been bitten more than once before with, that's 5 minutes, that's 20 minutes of my life I'm not going to get back, having read that thinly veiled press release disguised as a blog or a ebook or a white paper. So ITSM tools hopefully is allowing not only practitioners to get, I'd like to think, quality content on best practice, a lot of back to basic stuff. Also, we're trying to go to as many industry conferences as we can as well, and tweet and blog from there, but also start to get access to some of the vendor stuff, some of the, I suppose it's documenting their knowledge, skills and experience, and trying to share it with people. We're also doing what we call them solution snapshots. They're 8 to 10 page reviews. I shouldn't really talk about them because I've been talking about them for 3 months and I've still got them on my machine, and we've not published any yet. So that's two sides of the coin. You know, the readers and also the vendors, who can also be readers too. But then on a personal level, I missed being an analyst. You do different things, and having just written marketing collateral for different vendors over the last 2 years, it's great, but I miss looking at the technology, talking about the technology, advising on the technology, writing about the technology, just the whole technology side of things. So really, there's sort of the three different elements to it. Also, there's other people involved, and I'll probably forget someone's name. There's Rebecca Beach, Vaughan's Murphy, Duncan Watkins, Stuart Rance, Ivor McFarlane, Stevie Chambers, who's an interesting one, and Sophie Danby too, and really anyone else who wants to play. That it's more of a collective than anything else at the moment. That it's probably going to bore people, but it's probably worth talking about the business model or the operating model, in that, in the same way we've got the three sides to the coin, it's like a juggling of things to actually make it work, in that most of us can't afford to work for free. Most of us have a mortgage to pay for, or in your case, a lavish lifestyle to live.
I wish.
I'm glad you laughed. There was a little delay then. I thought, oh dear, that didn't go down very well. So the idea is that, all the content's provided for free, and the way we can afford to do that, and the way that those who participate can afford to live their lives in addition to other work that they will have, is that we create marketing collateral for vendors. If people look at the website, we do have an about us and then a transparency page, just to try and assure people that we are being relatively open book about it. So, for instance, if I was to write a blog for Vendor X, they publish it on their website, there would be a charge for it. If they want to write a blog and host it on ITSM tools, it doesn't cost them. We'll spend about an hour and a half reviewing it, proofreading it, publishing it, doing the SEO, socializing it, and there's no cost because the value is in the content. So it's an interesting situation, and it can be hard to explain to people. Thanks to who was it? It was Chris at Easy Vista said to me, "Do you have a deck you can send me?" And I said, "No, I just talk around in circles on it for hours and bore people with it." So, thanks to him, I've now got a deck, and I normally say to people, "Look, I'll save you half your life if I just send you the deck and you can read it and you can understand what we do, how it works." And it's evolving, in that when we started, we knew there were a number of things that we could do, but we took the approach that we'd rather do a few things well than a lot of things at best average, and a lot of times meh. So whilst we're doing the blogs, we do at least 2 a week. A lot of them recently have been about events, so it's a little bit different if you actually go to the homepage now. Post-event season or post-autumn event season, hopefully we'll get back to more of the back-to-basic stuff. The solution snapshots will be followed by other vendor-type things, but again, I'm the bottleneck on that, in that we're not doing comparisons, in that I'm not a big believer in them, but also I'm a big believer in consistency, which is why I'm writing the first 6 solution snapshots, and I don't want to release any of them until I have 6 done, so that not a case of the 3rd is better than the 1st and the 6th is better than the 3rd. We sort of achieve a level of quality and then stick to it, and then once we have that, it will become a lot easier for anyone else to write them in addition to me. Sorry, I digress myself quite a bit there, but hopefully somewhere within that jumble of words, there's some semblance of answer to your question.
Absolutely, and I would recommend anyone to go to itsm.tools. There's some great content and some really good quality content on there. So good on you, Stephen, for doing it. A lot of people are talking about it as well, so that's good.
When this is probably a little bit toot of my own trumpet, or our own trumpet, that when I started to make contact with vendors and say, look, we're starting this, it'll be a bit of a soft launch, I think most of them, if not all of them, were pretty excited about it, because I think it is difficult for them to not necessarily market their wares, because that sounds a little bit cynical, but to have a voice, and to have a voice away from their own website. Because I know that when I left Forrester and I went to the SaaS IT service management tool vendor, that notwithstanding the fact that having the Forrester logo behind you gets you a lot more reads, there's an implied authority or even an implied intelligence to that, that it was very hard to get reads on the vendor blog. And I'd like to think a lot of the content was better than the stuff that was getting more reads at Forrester, but people really struggle to go to the corporate website, to read the corporate blog, because, as I said earlier, they have been burnt too many times by stuff that isn't really worthy of their attention and time.
Yeah. So, Stephen, what would you say have been the major changes in terms of ITSM tools over the last sort of 5 to 10 years?
The first thing is probably nothing to do with the tools, is that a lot more people have them now. If you look at HDI stats, there's still a lot of companies that don't have a help desk or a service desk or an IT service management tool, or at least a fit for purpose one that isn't a CRM tool used for ITSM or a homegrown tool in notes. It's probably not even called that these days, to be fair. I don't know what it is called now. So more people use it. SaaS, I think, was a definite turning point. So towards the end of the last decade, that once the more traditional vendors stopped throwing mud at the newer vendors that were saying that SaaS is the future, and SaaS really started to take off, I think it not only allows for potentially a better solution, because it's not the delivery model that makes it a solution. I think what makes it better is the ability to have more releases, the ability to work with APIs to make a far more current and a far more easier to use solution. So I think that's been a big turning point. I think we've struggled with the obsession with trying to support as many ITIL processes as possible, and it's not to the detriment of ITIL, in that I'm sure all of the processes are suitable to different flavors of organization, but trying to put in and to map to as many processes as possible from a process automation perspective in particular has sort of steered us in the wrong direction, particularly because most organizations still do, incident management well. They pretend to do problem. Change is pretty good. They started service level management and gave up because it was too difficult. They started configuration management and gave up. Self-service, they gave it a good shot, but they didn't realize it was more than the technology. So in a way, and this is me being a little bit two-faced, the Gartner ITSM, which I used to loathe, I actually think is pretty sensible now, in that they're focusing on the things that most organizations will use. And even when you think that the Gartner clients are probably the larger organizations, you've then got to think, well, it's got to be true for smaller organizations. It's a generalization, but in the main, I don't think it needed the term, but I do like that level of focus. I think ease of use is something as well that is really making a difference these days. That if you look at people like Zendesk with their Zendesk for IT, or if you look at Freshdesk and Fresh Service, those two sort of immediately spring to mind from an ease of use perspective. That's not to say that I can name another 20 vendors and solutions that are in the right place or getting towards the right place, but they're the two where they sell probably more on ease of use than they do their breadth of IT service management capabilities. So that's another big part of it. And I think it'll be interesting as to how that interacts with customer experience, because we've got a lot more to do from that point of view. Consumerization, I think, is continuing to drive that, and also what the market would call enterprise service management, which I guess flips me back into the technology side of things in terms of how it's changed. That if you go back 10 years, probably even if you go back 5 years, and of course enterprise service management has been around the last 10 years, we just didn't talk about it as much, but it used to be a case of you'd want a help desk and you get sold an IT service management solution. hopefully because you could see the value rather than you wanted all the sexy features. These days, if you ask for a service desk or an IT service management solution, you'll probably get sold an enterprise service management solution. So I think that's another big difference from a tool point of view. I mentioned ease of use, but it's probably worth talking about flexibility, because for me that links in with enterprise service management. And I did something probably about 2 years ago. I went across a number of websites or vendor websites, and nearly all of them wanted to use the phrase scriptless, just to emphasize the ability to change through configuration rather than customization, which marketing exploitation aside, I think has to be a good thing in terms of not building a beast that's hard to tame and hard to move through in terms of different releases. I'm trying to think if there's probably so much other stuff I could mention, but I'm going to cut it because I'm going to bore you to death if I keep going.
No, that's good. And ease of use is a really interesting one. I heard a story not so long ago, and I won't mention the vendor, but someone was telling me a story where the vendor had brought in students to try and help do a test of a new release of their software, if I remember rightly. And they had software on their mobile devices or whatever it was. And the vendor representative said, okay, before we start, let me explain how you use this application. And one of the students went, no, I've just deleted it. If you have to tell me how to use it, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
You know, so it has to be intuitive, it has to be easy to use. And yeah, I thought that was a good story.
Yeah. And it also ties into some of the things that haven't necessarily changed in the last 10 years or the last 3 to 5 years, depending when things come in, that, you know, RFPs are still an abomination. People still waste so much time creating a list of things of which 50% they'll never use. 25% will probably cause them to make the wrong decision. Social IT or social ITSM didn't really work, which I think has sort of reappeared again from a collaboration point of view, which is probably healthier, or even from a digital workplace point of view as well. I think having mentioned enterprise service management, I think people need to realize that what we're calling enterprise service management probably is back end or back office digital transformation, taking away the manual elements, the reliance on things like email, spreadsheets, etc. So I think we've got something to learn there. And I guess we're sort of also on the cusp of whether you want to call it AI or machine learning or human and machine integration or whatever term it is. You know, I think that's probably going to be the next big thing. Or it is in fact a thing, maybe not a big thing yet, for a number of vendors, and perhaps we can come back to that shortly.
Mm-hmm. So Stephen, we've sort of touched on it, but the sources of assistance. So if I'm an organisation and going to market and going, okay, what's out there, what tools are available? We have things like, you know, the Gartner Magic Quadrant, we have Pink Verify. What value do you think they are for an organisation to refer to when they're looking at sourcing an ITSM tool?
Yeah, I think they're probably all valuable or have a value, but they only do so if used in the right context. So, for instance, if we start with the Magic Quadrant, where it doesn't matter which Gartner analyst you speak to, they'll tell you that the Magic Quadrant is about the vendors, it's not about the tool. And unfortunately, the Gartner document that sits alongside it, the critical capabilities, not as many people or not as many vendors license that. I can't remember who licensed it last year. I think it might have been Easy Vista that licensed it last year, but I could be wrong. And that's the document that really talks about the tool and its applicability to a large and medium and small size organization, which is good from a more focused point of view. Because if you look at the Magic Quadrant and even forget that it is just about the vendor rather than the tool, other than everybody thinking that they need the largest of vendor and the largest of IT service management tool, it's not going to help anything beyond that. You know, if you want to take that for your 10 vendors to long list and then shortlist, you're missing out on so many other different vendors that might have a better fitting solution. Or, this is going to sound rude, probably is rude, you might go for a smaller vendor that treats you as a more important customer, should we say, in that you can be a bigger fish in a smaller pond rather than a smaller fish in a bigger pond. Hopefully I got that the right way around. So it does have its value. And I know, I mean, when I was at Forrester, I did a market overview of SaaS ITSM solutions. So I know how much work goes into it in terms of creating the document. But then when I was in product marketing, I then filled out the Magic Quadrant submission. And the amount of work that vendors put in to it, which then gets scrunched down into something a hell of a lot smaller. For me, there's a lot of stuff in there that would be really valuable to practitioners or people just involved in the ITSM tool selection process that sort of disappears down a black hole, which is why the solution snapshot, you know, some people might say the documents are too long, but for me, it's a case of giving you something that takes you, let's say, 15 minutes to read. It might take you 5 minutes to read, depending on how quickly you read and how much you pause, rather than having to spend 2 weeks trying to pull all the information together from disparate sources. So, you know, I'm a fan of the Gartner stuff, but it's not granular enough, I don't think. And also, how many organizations are an average organization? Which, if you remember earlier, I said I don't necessarily want us to do comparison reports, because whilst we might have similar challenges, we probably have different perceptions as to what our wants and needs are and the relative levels of importance. And I know you can do a sliding scale and say this is more important than that, but I still think it's potentially dangerous. Same's true with Pink Verify, that it does actually have a worth, but I don't think people actually understand the worth. That a lot of people, so this is a gross generalization again, some people might look at a tool that has been Pink verified for 3, 5, 15 or 16 now processes and say, well, if Pink Elephants has said these 16 processes are aligned with ITIL to their satisfaction, then that's okay for us, which is not, I think the phrase I used to use was, it's like saying that somebody who has passed their driving test isn't going to have an accident. It's not necessarily the case. But I think where some of the value does lie, that when you're doing your RFP, if Pink has already said it does all of these things, why are you asking a vendor to tick yes or no against all the same capabilities? You're wasting your time and you're wasting their time. You'd be better off asking more pertinent questions that allow them to articulate how they're going to help, how they're going to deliver against your desired IT or business outcomes, rather than asking them things that they've already proven to you they can do because they've got the Pink Verify certification. But what really worries me is the number of vendors that seem to be shouting about the fact that some strange analyst firm that you've never heard of before has ranked them up in the upper quartile based on 3 people providing some form of customer satisfaction based response. I think we see far too much of that now, and I can't believe it's not gamed. I can't believe that it's not a case of the Stephen Mann vendor saying to his customers, "Oh, will you go and just say something nice about us at these 5 websites, and then I'll appear in the top quartile and I'll get some more business out of it." It just, I don't know, it just seems wrong to me. I mean, voice of the customer is extremely important, but I think you have to trust the source. Or if you're naive enough not to trust the source, then you're probably heading into even more murkier waters than if you think your organization fits the Gartner Magic Quadrant or critical capabilities average organization, or if you think that Pink Verify first 16 processes means that it's going to completely meet your needs. So I don't know whether scared is the right word, but I worry about organizations that look at those and make decisions based on them. It also worries me that vendors think that people are going to get excited about seeing that they're ranked number 2 in, I don't know, they've all got funny names. Let's say Infodiddle Twaddle. Their latest quarter's review of, I don't know, you might get 20 ServiceNow customers, 10 Landesk customers, 5 IBM customers, and the sample sizes for a start probably aren't large enough. And I think most people tend to do surveys, whether it be about IT service management tools or anything else, if they're extremely happy or if they're extremely unhappy. And particularly if vendors are pointing customers to these analyst firms, they're probably not going to point the ones who are unhappy. So I don't know. I probably spout a lot of hot air about nothing there and didn't convince anybody of anything, but I do think it's really scary. So probably the final thing to mention is, speak to your peers. I think that's probably now one of the easiest and best ways to find out information. It might take you a bit longer, and by peer, it might not be someone you work with who worked at another organization or used a tool, or even somebody you met at a conference. Just using the power of the internet, using the power of social media and communities. Because I always think it's interesting that it's just so easy to just type into Google Stephen Mann issues, and you'll probably find a lot of things that people have found disconcerting, unsavory, dissatisfactory about Stephen Mann's IT service management tool. That might be a glass half empty approach, but it's probably stuff that you might not find. And again, a bit like the voice of the customer type analyst firms, you probably do have to take things with a pinch of salt, that a disgruntled customer might say things that are probably appropriate to them, but it might not be appropriate to the whole of the vendor customer base. Is there anyone I didn't mention? Yeah, one more, and this might be a little bit rude. It worries me sometimes as well when analysts who think IT service management is service desk, or journalists who think that IT service management is just a few people who work in the IT crowd dealing with IT issues day in, day out, that they can get a fair bit of airtime, probably more in the mainstream media, sometimes through vendors investing in blogs, ebooks, white papers, case studies, etc. That I wonder sometimes whether people can cut through some of the nonsense that's spouted, and I've probably spouted some of my own nonsense in my time. I try not to write about stuff that I don't know about and I don't understand, but sometimes I might think I understand and I don't. But I still read a lot of stuff, and particularly with press releases, actually, that normally you can tell by the first line whether it's worth reading the rest of it, because it might say Stephen Mann, the leading IT service management tool vendor. And you think, well, no, you're not. You could say Stephen Mann, one of the leading ITSM tool vendors. And I think, well, if you're going to overstate things in the first line, then I'm not going to believe anything else. Or just little things like the number of things you read, whether it be a journalist, a small analyst firm that doesn't focus on ITSM, or even some of the marketing collateral that still says IT infrastructure, library brackets, ITIL. And no, I was a little bit late catching up. I don't think I found out until around about 2009, but I'm assured we stopped all that brackets ITIL nonsense in June 2007 with ITIL v3. But yeah, so for me, I just hope that people pick up on these things and then take everything else with a pinch of salt.
Absolutely.
I've probably done that once a day now. Yeah, so I suppose I'm not really saying anything positive, have I? Which is a bit remiss of me.
So tell us, Stephen, let's look at something positive. What do you see as the changes in, if there are changes in ITSM tools in the next sort of 5 to 10 years going forwards?
I've already mentioned ease of use and customer experience, and I think both sides of that equation will continue to shape ITSM tools. And if it doesn't shape the tools, it'll shape the purchasing decisions around the tools, which will then shape the tools. So whichever way you look at it, that people will find that there is a better way, or they should have different expectations. Because people often say to me, why are people still using that tool? And I say, well, it's because they don't know anything better is out there. They've either not had the inclination, or they've not had the time, or they know they're not going to get any more money to invest in a different solution. So they just make the most of what they've got. Or if they've got a homegrown tool, I can't believe that these people, if these people who are using a homegrown tool had a conversation with any salesperson worth their salt, I can't believe that they couldn't be convinced that a little bit of expenditure now would save them a hell of a lot of money in the long run. So I think something's got to give on self-service, that we continue to see 80% of companies now claim to have some form of self-service for corporate IT or company IT. And it's a self-service that they then want to let HR use or facilities use. Adoption levels continue to be low. A lot of it is ease of use, a bit like your app example and deleting it. A lot of it is to do with one of your favorite areas, organizational change management, and trying to sell the what's in it for me to change behaviors, that sort of thing, and trying to bring people with you rather than just doing the field of dreams, build it and they'll come approach to self-service. So I think that will more and more drive purchasing decisions, that the benefits of self-service that are there to be had, not only from a cost reduction and a time saving, but from a consumer world expectation of corporate IT, it will become an important part of the decisions that are being made. And I think we're seeing that now. I mentioned the two vendors earlier on that are probably doing the deals based on self-service as much as anything else. I also mentioned AI and machine learning, that we've sort of had an evolution of, let's call it automation, that we had process automation from the early days of ITSM tools. We then had orchestration, which has become far more important from a cloud point of view. But the next evolution, and it's here already, to be fair, that HP has got Autonomy that they bought many years ago. IBM's got Watson. You can look at smaller companies, new companies, or companies that have come into the ITSM space. So two that I've been speaking to recently, one of them is called Loom Systems. That's very much around event management and using the AI to work out what's important, and also the AI to suggest solutions. Could also be applied from a problem management point of view. Another company is called Kaleo Software, and that's very much from a knowledge management and self-service end of things. And I'm a bit rusty when it comes to tools because I've not been an analyst for probably 3.5 years now. But for Kaleo to show me the AI providing self-service via email, and I'm thinking, well, I've never seen that before. It must be out there. I've never had a vendor say, when they email in with, I've got an issue with this, it just sends them, in the same way, had they done it in the online portal, I've got an issue with this, and it would give them some FAQs or some solutions. Just pings back an email, try this, try the other, without any human involvement. Did it resolve it? Yep, ticket closed. And it's just so simple and so obvious, and probably used that, well, it is used outside of IT because that's where Kaleo come from. I'm probably saying their name incorrectly as well, so apologies. So that's another side of things. The whole DevOps / ITSM / ITIL debate, I think that will ultimately have an impact on the ITSM tools. Some people talk about, ITSM going the way of ITOM. It has happened and could continue to happen. But I think we've got more chance of some of the pure play ITSM vendors creating their tools or extending their tools or merging tools to make it a more DevOps type scenario rather than having disparate technologies. I'd like to think, because I forever live in hope, that people will get better at selecting the right tools as well. But then again, I've probably been thinking that for a long time.
Stephen, I see, as you do, organisations select a tool, 2 years later, they're back out to market. What's the biggest mistake they're making? I mean, why are they doing that? It's like Groundhog Day,
Yeah, it depends which angle you come at it from. The first thing I say is that they ask the wrong question, so they get the wrong answer. So the fact that they've taken a template from a friend who took it from their friend, who took it from a consultant who got it from Barclay Ray, because he keeps telling me he wrote one years and years ago that the points still keep coming up in people's RFPs, that they're asking for all this stuff that they don't need or stuff that they think they need and they'll never use. That it's not surprising that they end up with something that's probably good at the things they don't want to do and not necessarily good at the things that they do want to do. So that's probably one thing. Second thing is, and you'll have seen it, people tend to try and replace what they've got with something that's similar. And if it's not similar, they try to change it to make it similar. So, just plowing down that same old route. Probably the biggest thing, though, is not realizing that changing the tool isn't necessarily the answer. Or if you do change it, that you do have to do a lot more around it than you probably did the last time. Whether it be actually stumping up the cash for professional services, whether it be the vendors or a third-party consultant, to actually make sure the tool is implemented in a way that it can deliver the outcomes you deem appropriate. Also, the whole people side of thing as well, the organizational change management again, driving the right behaviors, getting buy-in, and getting people to understand that whilst it is difficult to do things differently, if you can understand why you're doing it and the good old-fashioned what's in it for me, you've got to have a far better chance of succeeding with that. You're probably never going to get away from the grass is always greener, that we do go through, they're not necessarily hype cycles, but we do have a certain level of fashionability, if that's a word, when it comes to solutions or capabilities. But no, I think the first three are probably the main ones that we just probably don't go about it in we don't go about things in the right way. That I'd like to think that we think it's simpler than it is, but we probably actually overcomplicate things. That we probably want to get too far into the weeds, and then we lose track of the bigger picture. Yeah, there's probably another 10 things you could talk about here, but they're the ones that spring to mind.
No, absolutely. We're definitely on the same page. I think it's understanding what your needs are, and like you say, not borrowing off Barclay and going from there.
Barclay doesn't lend money, so yeah, borrowing from Barclay is quite hard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Stephen, I think there's some really good takeaways there for people in regards to, you know, tool selection, tool usage, looking at the vendors, understanding, you know, what your individual needs are, and like you said, not just trying to replace like for like. I'd like to thank you so much for your time. It's been really interesting conversation. I know it's your evening there, and you'll be looking to get on with that. So thank you so much. Much appreciated.
Cheers.